The December wind cut down State Street like a knife, sharp enough to sting exposed skin and rattle the bones. Bill Henderson barely noticed. At 73, his body was already cold from the inside out, hollowed by the words Dr. Mitchell had spoken 2 weeks earlier. 6 months, maybe less. The kind of sentence that rewires your heartbeat. He'd lived through market crashes, boardroom wars, divorces, and betrayals, but nothing prepared him for the quiet inevitability of those words. His Armani coat, once a shield of authority, hung loose against his thinning frame as he trudged toward a cafe he had never noticed before, though it sat just blocks from his penthouse. Rosie's Corner Cafe. The windows were fogged with warmth, tiny yellow lights glowing like fireflies behind the glass. It looked nothing like the marble lobbies or crystal chandeliers that had been his world for 4 decades. Maybe that was why he pushed the squeaky door open and stepped inside. He was tired of polished surfaces that reflected no warmth back. The cafe was small, its mismatched chairs scraped from different decades, its floor worn but clean. The air smelled of ground coffee and sugar, an aroma that wrapped itself around him before he could retreat. Bill approached the counter, his voice rougher than usual. "Large black coffee, please." The young cashier offered a polite smile, already scribbling on a paper cup. Bill reached into his pocket and froze. Empty. His other pocket, then his inside coat pocket. Nothing. A hot flash of panic burned through him. William Henderson had never in his adult life been unable to pay for something he wanted. The humiliation spread faster than the cold ever had. I seem to have forgotten my wallet," he said, voice thick, cheeks heating. For a man who had signed billion-dollar deals with a steady hand, the admission felt like stripping naked in public. As the cashier hesitated, lips parting with sympathy she wasn't sure she should offer. Before she could speak, a voice piped up from the corner, small, high, and startlingly clear. "Mister, you can have mine. I'm already full anyway." Bill turned. The source was a little girl, no older than 8. She sat at a small table with a half-finished cup of hot chocolate pushed toward him. Her sweater was faded purple, the cuffs frayed with tiny holes. Her jeans were patched at the knees, her shoes worn enough that cardboard peeked out from the soles. Yet her eyes, big, brown, and steady, were warm enough to thaw something inside his chest he hadn't realized was frozen. "Sweetheart, I couldn't possibly." "Please, mister, you look really cold." She smiled, revealing a front tooth missing. "Mama always says sharing makes everything taste better." The cafe fell into silence. Even the hiss of the espresso machine seemed to pause. Bill stared at her, at the generosity offered so easily by someone who clearly had so little. He reached for the cup. Their hands brushed, and for a moment he felt something he hadn't in years, a spark of human connection, raw and uncalculated. "What's your name, Angel?" His voice was softer now. "Emma Rodriguez," she said proudly. "What's yours?" "William, but you can call me Bill." He lifted the cup, tasting the warmth she'd given up. Not hot chocolate, but hope, laced with marshmallow sweetness and the faintest trace of her courage. "Thank you, Emma Rodriguez. This might be the most important coffee of my life." Outside, the wind still howled, but Bill barely felt it as he stepped back into the street, clutching the cup like a talisman. The city lights blurred through gathering snow, but he wasn't thinking of the skyline. He looked once over his shoulder. Through the fogged cafe window, Emma watched him go, her gap-toothed smile pressed to the glass. For the first time since his diagnosis, Bill felt a pulse of something he had nearly forgotten, the fragile, impossible stirring of hope. The city slept restlessly that night, but Bill Henderson did not. He paced the marble floors of his penthouse, their cold echo mocking him. The cup of hot chocolate sat on the counter where he'd placed it hours earlier, a simple paper cup that carried more weight than all the gold-trimmed glasses in his kitchen. He couldn't stop seeing the girl's face, Emma, her sweater stretched thin, her smile steady, her hand pushing her only luxury across the table to a stranger. Why had it mattered so much? Bill had been offered everything in life. Political favors, yacht invitations, women who promised forever until the prenup was signed. He had been showered with gifts that cost more than some people's homes. Yet nothing had pierced him. Nothing except the gift of a child's half-finished hot chocolate. At 3 a.m, unable to endure the gnawing in his chest, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Marcus," he rasped when the sleepy voice answered. "I need you to find someone for me." "Sir, at this hour, a child. Her name is Emma Rodriguez, 8 years old. She was at Rosie's Corner Cafe this afternoon. I want everything, family, where she lives, what she eats for breakfast. Quietly, Marcus. No headlines, no mistakes. There was a pause. Is this a legal issue? Security concern? No, Bill whispered, staring at his reflection in the window, the city glittering behind. It's something else. Just find her. 2 days later, a thin file slid across his desk, and for the first time in decades, William Henderson's hands trembled as he opened it. Maria Rodriguez, 24, single mother, works 3 jobs, janitor, grocery stocker, laundromat attendant, monthly income, $1,800, monthly expenses, $1,850. Behind every number, Bill saw exhaustion, sacrifice, despair. Carmen Rodriguez, 58, grandmother, watches Emma while battling diabetes, stretching insulin doses to last twice as long as prescribed. No savings, no margin. But what struck him hardest was a small note Marcus had added in the margin. Emma saved quarters for 2 months to buy that hot chocolate. Birthday money from her grandmother, an early Christmas present to herself. The paper blurred as Bill gripped it tighter. That cup she gave away had been her gift, the one thing she had chosen for herself. And she gave it to him. The next afternoon, he stood outside Emma's school, coat collar up, cap pulled low. Children burst through the doors, voices loud and bright against the gray Chicago sky. Then he saw her, purple sweater, ponytail bouncing, hugging a friend goodbye. She walked slowly, carefully, as though each step had to stretch until the next meal. Bill followed at a distance. She stopped at a corner store, counted her coins one by one, and bought a single banana. Splitting it neatly in half, she ate one piece, tucked the other in a napkin, and slipped it into her pocket. For later, or perhaps for her grandmother. Shame coiled in Bill's stomach. He, who had dined on 7-course meals in Paris and left half untouched, was watching a child ration half a banana, and she had still given him her hot chocolate. That night, Bill called his lawyer. His voice was steady, but his chest burned. Sarah, I want to set up an anonymous charitable fund. Start with the Rodriguez family. Cover their rent for a year. Quietly. No signatures, no spotlights. You usually like your philanthropy public, Sarah remarked. What's different this time? Bill stared at the paper cup on his counter, still intact, still holy. This isn't philanthropy, he said. This is something else. Call it penance. The next morning, in a cramped kitchen on the other side of the city, Maria Rodriguez held a letter in trembling hands. The rent for their 1-bedroom apartment had been paid in full for the next 12 months. She read the words again, her eyes wide. Anonymous benefactor, she whispered. Carmen eyed the paper with suspicion. Nobody gives money like that for free. What's the catch? Maria didn't know. She wanted to believe it was real, but she had learned the hard way that miracles were for other people, not for women who scrubbed floors at midnight and fell asleep on buses between shifts. Still, when Emma skipped through the apartment after school, humming to herself and pulling the napkin-wrapped banana from her pocket, Maria couldn't stop the tears that blurred her vision. She kissed her daughter's head, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone would hear. Across town, Bill sat in the dark, staring at the skyline he once thought he owned. For the first time, he wondered what it might mean to actually belong to it. Snow clung stubbornly to the sidewalks, melting in patches where salt had burned it into gray slush. Inside Rosie's Corner Cafe, the windows were fogged again, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon muffins and bitter espresso. Bill pushed open the door, his heart beating harder than it ever had for any corporate negotiation. He told himself it was just coffee, just routine, but his eyes betrayed him, sweeping the cafe until they landed on her. Emma sat in the corner booth, a paper cup cradled in her small hands, her feet swinging above the floor. Beside her, an older woman with silver-streaked hair carefully broke a muffin into 3 perfect pieces, placing one on a napkin in front of Emma, one for herself, and saving the last piece as if it needed rationing. That must be Carmen, Bill thought, the grandmother, the keeper of traditions and sacrifices, the woman who stretched pennies into meals and insulin into survival. Before he could lose his nerve, Emma spotted him. Her face lit up like someone had switched on Christmas lights inside her chest. "Bill!" she cried, hopping down from the booth. She ran across the cafe and wrapped her arms around his waist, as if she'd known him all her life. The contact stunned him. When was the last time anyone had touched him without calculation, without wanting something? His body tensed, then softened as he bent slightly and returned the embrace. "I was hoping I'd see you again," Emma said, her eyes bright. Bill swallowed, his throat tight. "And here I am." She tugged his hand, pulling him toward her table with a child's absolute certainty that the world would bend to her joy. Carmen looked up, measuring him with eyes sharp from a lifetime of watching men come and go. The expensive watch, the immaculate coat, the posture of a man who had lived in boardrooms. But she also saw something else, loneliness, deep as winter, So, Carmen said slowly, her accent shaping each word, you are the man Emma gave her chocolate to. Hot chocolate, Emma corrected seriously. And yes, this is him. Bill inclined his head. Your granddaughter saved my day. Carmen's eyes softened slightly, but suspicion lingered. Most adults would not let a child help them. Pride. Emma piped up. But Bill let me, and that made me feel big. The words cracked something in Bill's chest. For decades, he had been the one to control, to decide, to give. He had forgotten what it meant to receive. As they talked, Emma chattered about school, about her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, and how she wanted to start a book club, but couldn't because it met after school and Abuela couldn't drive her. Carmen shared fragments of old stories, recipes passed down, songs sung in their homeland. Bill listened, really listened, the way he never had in meetings where millions were at stake. Here, the stakes were infinitely higher. But Emma's gaze lingered on him with childlike bluntness. You look sad sometimes, Bill. Are you okay? The question slid past his armor. He forced a smile. I've been better, but meeting you has helped. Carmen tilted her head, studying him again. Something wasn't right. Wealthy men didn't sit in corner cafes with children. They didn't listen to stories about tortillas and book clubs. And yet here he was, eating the third of a muffin Emma pushed toward him as if it were holy bread. After an hour, Bill found himself laughing, really laughing, as Carmen instructed him how to dice onions with love, and Emma clapped at his crooked cuts. Maria arrived late, exhausted from a shift, her eyes widening when she saw the scene, her daughter beaming, her mother relaxed, and a stranger in an Armani coat looking like he belonged in their kitchen. Bill stood awkwardly. Please call me Bill, and thank you for letting me intrude, Ma. Maria's voice carried suspicion under its politeness. It's unusual for men like you to take interest in families like ours. What exactly do you want? The question hit like a blade, but it was fair. He had no answer she would believe. Not yet. So he said the truest thing he could. I want to matter to someone before it's too late. Maria studied him, lips pressed tight. Carmen looked down at her hands. Emma, oblivious to the adult current swirling, simply said, well, you matter to me. You're my friend, maybe even my grandpa. The word detonated inside him. Grandpa. He had never been anyone's anything. No father, no uncle worth remembering, no partner who lasted. But here, in a mismatched cafe booth, a child had given him an identity he had never dared to dream of. His hand trembled as he lifted his cup, not from the cold, not from nerves, but from the shadow of the truth he still hadn't told them. His time was running out, and they didn't know. Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, for the first time in decades, Bill Henderson felt warm. The new year arrived like a thief, stealing daylight faster than anyone noticed. Chicago sank deeper into its winter, streets glazed in ice, wind that cut straight through bone. For weeks, Bill had lived in the glow of something he hadn't known since childhood, belonging. The cafe had become their ritual. Emma waiting with her hot chocolate, Carmen dividing muffins into equal shares, Maria walking in late with tired eyes and hands raw from bleach and soap. But shadows never let joy stay untouched. They creep in at the edges, quiet at first. It began with a cough. A small, dry sound from Emma that she brushed off with a wave of her hand. Just winter, she insisted when Abuela fussed over her with tea and honey. Bill pretended not to notice, but inside his chest, a coil of dread tightened. He had memorized too many hospital corridors. In recent months, too many diagnoses that didn't care about wealth or hope. Within a week, the cough deepened. Maria tried to keep Emma home from school, but the girl begged to go. She didn't want to miss Mrs. Patterson's lessons or the library books she borrowed 2 at a time. Still, her cheeks grew pale, her breath shorter, her steps slower. Then came the fever. It was Carmen who called Bill that night, her voice trembling. Senor Henderson, she is burning up. Maria already took her to the emergency. Bill didn't think. He simply moved. One moment he was in his penthouse staring at the skyline. The next he was behind the wheel, tearing down frozen streets, lights blurring, ignoring every red light. He had never driven himself in years. Chauffeurs had always been his shadow. But tonight, the wheel belonged in his own hands. His foot pressed harder on the gas, as if speed alone could bargain with fate. By the time he burst through the sterile doors of Chicago Children's Hospital, Maria was pacing the hallway, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone. Carmen sat in a chair, rosary clutched, whispering prayers with lips pressed white. She can't breathe right, Maria choked. They say pneumonia, both lungs. Bill swallowed hard, The words dragged him back decades to the day Dr. Mitchell had said cancer. Different illness, same helpless silence. He placed a hand on Maria's arm, steady where hers trembled. She's strong. She'll fight. But Maria shook her head, eyes red. The insurance. The deductible alone is $3,000. If she needs extended care, stop, Bill said, voice firm. Don't think about money, not for 1 second, not while she's fighting to breathe. Maria's lips pressed together, pride warring with desperation. Bill, I can't let you. Yes, you can, he interrupted. This isn't charity. This is family, and family doesn't keep score. Emma lay pale and small against the white sheets when Bill finally stepped into the room. Her eyes flickered open, finding him instantly, and her lips curved into the faintest smile. You came. Of course I came, sweetheart. His voice broke. Where else would I be? For 6 days, he did not leave her side. He read her stories when her eyes stayed open long enough, held her hand when she cried in the night, whispered reassurances even when she drifted back into feverish dreams. The hospital bed became his boardroom. The monitor beeps his new minutes. Emma's breath, the only vote that mattered. On the 4th night, when her fever was highest, she whispered something that cut him to the core. Bill, are you going to die before I get better? The question stole his breath. He looked into her frightened eyes, searching for an answer that wouldn't crush her. At last he whispered, No, I'll be here when you get better, I promise. Her small hand relaxed, trusting, and she drifted back into sleep. Bill sat there in the glow of the monitor, his chest splitting. He knew he had lied. His time was shorter than he dared admit, shorter even than the doctors had predicted, but for her, he would pretend immortality. When Emma was discharged, weak but smiling, Bill insisted they come to his penthouse. His voice left no room for protest. My place has doctors on call, air filters, space for all of you. Until she's strong again, she stays with me. Maria hesitated. Carmen studied him, then nodded slowly. Sometimes, she whispered to her daughter in Spanish, angels come disguised as lonely men. We do not question God's methods. In the weeks that followed, their lives shifted into something none of them could have predicted. Emma turned the sterile penthouse into a home, her laughter bouncing against marble, her crayons scattered across polished glass tables. Maria cooked in his gleaming kitchen, filling the air with garlic, cumin, and warmth. Carmen hummed as she folded laundry into neat piles, as if she'd always lived there. But shadows kept pressing in. Bill's health was slipping faster than he let on. He grew tired quicker, his hands shook when he thought no one was looking, and late at night when the apartment was still, he stared at his reflection in the glass windows, watching time run out. It was then he made a decision that would alter everything. The truth could not stay hidden. If he had weeks, he wanted them to be honest weeks. 2 days later, at Rosie's Cafe, he sat across from Emma, Maria, and Carmen. His hands folded, his heart pounding harder than it had in any hostile takeover. He cleared his throat. Emma, he said softly, there's something I need to tell you, something important. She tilted her head, curious. What is it, Bill? He glanced at Maria, at Carmen, then back at the little girl who had given away her hot chocolate without hesitation. His voice cracked. I'm very sick, and I don't have much time. The cafe went silent. Emma's small hand slid over his, steady and sure. Then we'll just take extra good care of you, she said with matter-of-fact certainty, as though it were the simplest solution in the world. And in that moment, the man who once commanded empires broke down in a corner cafe because an 8-year-old girl had offered to love him through his dying. Bill's penthouse had never been louder, not with noise. He'd hosted galas and charity dinners where orchestras played, but with life. The kind of noise that came from crayons rolling off tables, pots simmer. In the kitchen, Emma's laughter skipping through the air like music. For weeks, his sterile glass and marble fortress had pulsed with something he thought he'd lost forever. Warmth. But even warmth draws shadows. It began with whispers. A clerk in his lawyer's office, a cousin who hadn't called in 10 years, a journalist sniffing around the neighborhood. Word was leaking that William Henderson, billionaire hotel magnate, was dying, and that his money was moving in an unusual direction, toward a little girl in a purple sweater. The first phone call came late at night. Maria answered, her voice sharp from fatigue. Rodriguez residence. A man's voice cut her off, oily and insistent. We're running a story. Did you manipulate Mr. Henderson? Did you coach your daughter to... Maria slammed the phone down, her hand shaking. She turned to Bill, her eyes flashing with a fury he hadn't seen before. They're calling us gold diggers, saying we planned this, that Emma tricked you. Emma, sitting at the table with her coloring book, looked up, her brows furrowing. What's a gold digger? Carmen's voice was gentle but steady. Someone who pretends to love for money. Emma's little face hardened with a fire Bill had never seen. That's stupid. We loved Bill before we even knew he was rich. And we'd love him if he was poor too. She turned to Bill with fierce certainty. Right, Grandpa? The word, Grandpa, wrapped itself around him like armor. He managed to smile, though his chest burned with anger. Right, sweetheart. But he knew the storm was only beginning. 2 days later, his estranged nephew David arrived, uninvited, his wife Jennifer at his side. They swept into the penthouse as if they owned it, their perfume and cologne sharp enough to cut through the air. Uncle Bill, David began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We heard rumors that you're leaving everything to this child. His eyes flicked toward Emma, who was sitting cross-legged on the rug, arranging puzzle pieces. Bill's gaze was cold. You haven't spoken to me in 5 years, not until there was money in the air. Jennifer stepped forward, her tone syrupy. We're worried, that's all. You're lonely, vulnerable. This family, she gestured toward Maria and Carmen with a disdain she didn't bother hiding. They've clearly inserted themselves into your life at a delicate time. Emma rose from the rug, small but unshaken. She looked at David directly, her voice calm. Are you sad that Grandpa Bill is dying? The question caught him off guard. He stammered, well, of course, he's family. Then why didn't you come sooner? Why wait until now? David's face flushed. It's complicated. Emma shook her head, her dark ponytail swinging. It's not complicated. Either you love someone or you don't. We loved him before we knew he was rich. We love him because he's Grandpa Bill. If you wanted to be his family, you could have been here, but you weren't. Silence fell heavy. David muttered something about lawyers and stormed out, Jennifer's heels clicking angrily against the marble. The door slammed, but the damage lingered. Bill sank into his chair, exhausted. Maria crouched in front of him. You see? This money, it's a curse. People will come for us. They'll twist everything. Bill took her hands in his voice rough. Then we'll protect Emma. I'll make sure of it. That night, he called Sarah Chen, his attorney. Her voice was steady but laced with concern. Bill, are you absolutely certain about this decision? There are other ways to provide for Emma, trust funds, scholarships, without making her a target. Bill stared at the skyline, lights glittering like a city that didn't care if he lived or died. Sarah, she saved me, not metaphorically, not symbolically. She gave me a reason to live when I had none. If that's not worth my fortune, what would be? But think about the implications, Sarah pressed. She's 8. Do you want her childhood consumed by lawyers, bodyguards, financial advisors? She'll never be normal again. Bill's jaw tightened. Then make it so she can choose. She gets education funds immediately, medical care, a home, but the bulk, she doesn't touch it until she's 30. And if she doesn't want it, it goes to charity. Her choice, her future, not mine. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then, that might work. It gives her protection and freedom. Bill exhaled, his chest tight. Do it, before my time runs out. The next evening, he gathered them in the living room, Maria, Carmen, and Emma sitting side by side on the couch. His voice trembled as he explained, I'm leaving everything to Emma, but not all at once. She'll have what she needs, college, a home, her family cared for. The rest will wait, until she's old enough to decide what to do with it. Maria covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Carmen whispered a prayer, her eyes glistening. Emma blinked, confused. But Bill, I don't want your money. I just want you. Bill pulled her onto his lap, his heart breaking. I know, Angel, but I can't give you forever. So I'm giving you something that will let you help other people the way you helped me. You can use it to make the world better. She tilted her head, considering. Then she smiled, a small, fierce smile. Then I'll use it like hot chocolate, to make people warm when they're cold. Bill closed his eyes. He had heard countless business pitches, but none as powerful as that. Outside, Chicago's winter pressed against the windows, cold and relentless. Inside, for one fragile moment, warmth won. But Bill knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. Spring came to Chicago like a secret whispered at midnight, slow at first, hesitant, as if afraid the winter might overhear. Ice retreated from Lake Michigan in long groans, gray sidewalks revealed themselves beneath melting snow, and buds dared to appear on skeletal trees. But inside Bill Henderson's penthouse, time wasn't thawing, it was running out. Each morning, Emma arrived at his bedside like a soldier reporting for duty. She adjusted his pillows, smoothed his blankets, set his water glass where he could reach it. Her hands were small, but her resolve was enormous. Abuela says being sick doesn't mean you stop living, she would announce. So we're going to keep living, Grandpa Bill. Every single day. They had a list, a handwritten manifesto in Emma's looping third-grade scrawl. Things Bill needs to do before heaven. Together, they checked off the boxes. Eat Abuela's enchiladas, even if he burned the onions trying. Go ice skating, even if he fell. He did, spectacularly, and laughed harder than he had in years. Visit Emma's classroom, where she proudly told her classmates, "This is my grandpa." Pick out a birthday present for Maria. Emma chose a book of poetry, and Bill added a necklace she believed she had bought herself. But each joyful checkmark was shadowed by another, unspoken countdown. The days left. By mid-March, Bill's decline was visible to all of them. His walks shortened to a few steps. His laugh was quieter. At night, the pain required more medication than before. Emma noticed. She always noticed. One evening, as she curled up beside him, she whispered, "Grandpa Bill, are you scared?" "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I get scared too," she said, her head resting on his chest. "But Mama says being scared means something is important. You're important to me. So I'll be scared with you. We can be scared together." Her words wrapped around him like armor, shielding him from the loneliness that had stalked him for decades. But outside their cocoon, the world was circling. Tabloids speculated, headlines hinted at scandal. Billionaire's fortune promised a child stranger. Paparazzi gathered near the school. Sarah Chen tightened the legal web, ensuring Emma's inheritance was untouchable, but she warned him, "The noise won't stop. People will question. They will claw." Bill's response was simple, "Then I'll leave Emma a shield stronger than money." He spent his final weeks recording messages, one for her 18th birthday, one for her wedding day, one for the day she became a teacher. Each video held the same thread, love, pride, a reminder that wealth was nothing without kindness. But there was one final secret, one final gift that he hadn't told even Sarah about. Not yet. April arrived with shy warmth. Emma's 9th birthday was days away, but Bill knew he wouldn't see it. His body was failing faster than the calendar could move. Hospice nurses came daily now, their quiet efficiency a reminder that endings were near. Carmen sang softly in Spanish by his bedside. Maria kept vigil, exhaustion etched in her face but love steady in her eyes. Emma refused to leave his side. "If you go to heaven," she whispered one night, "you won't be lonely. You can tell them all about us, about Mama's singing and Abuela's cooking, and how I'm going to be a teacher. You'll have stories to tell, Grandpa Bill. You won't be alone." Tears slipped silently down his cheeks. He realized then, Emma wasn't just preparing herself for his death, she was preparing him. On his last evening, the city stretched out beyond the window, lights twinkling like distant stars. Bill asked for one thing. "Tell me the story again," he said softly. "The hot chocolate." So Emma told it in her earnest way. How a stranger in a fancy coat had no money for coffee. How she gave him her hot chocolate. How his hands had trembled when he took it. She ended the story the same way she always did. "And that's when I knew you needed me." Bill smiled faintly. His hand relaxed in hers. His breathing slowed. Emma leaned closer. "Not goodbye," she whispered. "Just see you later." And with that, William Henderson, billionaire, empire builder, lonely man turned grandfather, slipped away, surrounded by the love he had craved all his life. The funeral was small. Bill had requested no grand gestures, no gilded displays, only family. Maria and Carmen sat with Emma, who clutched the worn paper cup Bill had saved from that first day. The hot chocolate long gone, but the meaning eternal. A week later, Sarah arrived at the apartment with a sealed envelope. "He left this for you," she said softly. "All of you." Inside was a letter written in Bill's uneven handwriting. "Emma, Maria, Carmen, before I leave you everything, I must tell you the truth. I grew up just blocks from where you live now, poor, frightened, shoes patched with cardboard, stomach filled with half a banana at a time. I ran from that life and built walls of glass and steel to keep it out. But I never stopped being that boy. It took a little girl's hot chocolate to bring him back home." Enclosed with the letter was a deed. Bill had quietly purchased Rosie's Corner Cafe. He'd placed it into a trust, the Emma Rodriguez Foundation. It would serve as a community center, providing hot meals, a tutoring, and safe space for families like theirs. Above the door, a new plaque had already been installed. "Sharing makes everything taste better." Emma pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He gave me a family," she whispered. "Now, he gave me a future." Years later, when Emma stood in front of her first classroom, chalk dust on her hands and children's eyes fixed on her with trust, she carried with her not just knowledge, but legacy. She built schools, funded by Bill's fortune. She served hot meals to hungry kids. She taught them what her grandpa had taught her, that love multiplies when shared, and sometimes the smallest gift can change the world. And in a quiet corner of Chicago, in a cafe with fogged windows and mismatched chairs, a new generation of children learned the same lesson from a plaque above the counter. Because once, a little girl gave away her hot chocolate, and the world has been warmer ever since.